I'm going to call this special meeting of the MBTA zoning task force to order. It's December 7th, 6:34. And we just did a roll call, but I'll do it again. Sue Philbrick.
Here.
Richard Smith.
Here.
And Harrison.
Here.
Mike Pratt is on Zoom.
Yep, here.
Gar Morse.
Here.
And Sandy and Sarah Melishman.
Sandy's signing up.
Sandy.
Sandy's coming right.
She's online.
Are you there, Sandy?
On mute to say so.
Oh, we can't hear you, Sandy.
Unmute.
Yes.
Hi.
Ah, there she is. Okay. Okay, so I have a brief announcement to make about this meeting. We're going to be hearing from a group of graduate students from MIT who've been using Manchester as kind of case study or laboratory for how the state's zoning mandate could be implemented. They've been working for the past several months under the direction of Jeff Levine and Dave Gamble, who are both members of the MIT faculty in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. I want to make it clear that this work tonight is the work of the students. They have spent time here in town. They've talked with many of us. They gave a preliminary presentation to the task force last month. And they got feedback from many of us from that. While some of the initial ideas seemed a bit impractical, we were all impressed by the quality and the professionalism of their presentation. Students wondered tonight if they could present some ideas that might seem to us as outlandish or unfeasible. And we told them to go for it. We aren't the ones handing out the grades. That's the job of the MIT faculty. We might well benefit from having a bold and innovative approach to dealing with our town. We'll certainly benefit from the analysis of demographic and land use data that they'll give us. And even if some of the ideas seem far-fetched, there will be things for us to think about as we move forward. We also hope that the students have gained from this project as they have grappled with some of the issues and obstacles of this complicated problem. It's one thing to come up with a fabulous and well thought out plan. It's a much bigger thing to figure out how to implement it in the real world. So let's allow the students to make their presentation. At the end, I'll ask for task force members for their questions and comments. And then I'll allow questions and comments from the public. And we're going to turn off the chat function because that can cause problems with the rules of open meetings. So when the public calls in, I'll ask for your name and address when you wish to speak. And I'll also let the students respond to questions and comments as they are presented. So let's make this a informal and open discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to, I don't know, one of those MIT students to start the presentation.
I think we're just waiting here a second as the screen share loads. Manchester by the Sea, MBTA Communities Act Task Force, thank you so much for hosting us. My name is Pancho Mackin-Planky. I'm a second-year Master in City Planning student here at MIT, looking to work in housing and stay in Massachusetts after this program. Today, 3 of us will be presenting to you all about updates to our work. And I'd like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Melissa, currently navigating some logistics of screen sharing. But I'll briefly introduce myself. I am also a Master in City Planning student here in the department, and I'm originally from Central Kentucky. And it's just been such an honor to work on this project this semester. So excited to share a bit about what we've been up to. And this is Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm also a Master's in City Planning student, second year. And yeah, excited to present. You want to start, Brian?
Could you advance the slide one? Yeah, so in today's presentation, we're going to review the context of our class and what we've worked on. We're going to highlight what we've seen and really enjoyed about getting to learn about Manchester. We're going to bring forward our MBTA Communities Act implementation strategies, which you all have already heard an earlier version of, and we're excited to bring a fuller version to you all. To really highlight the work we're doing in our priorities, we've put together a design concept of the area around the station that we think is really exciting. And then finally, we're going to round it out by talking a little bit more about our methodology and how we thought about infrastructure. Just a reminder, there are 18 of us in this class, and we come from a variety of different backgrounds. All three of us speaking to you today are second-year Master in City Planning students. This class is a practicum at MIT. What that means is we spend the whole semester working, facing a client, a community, trying to work on real-world issues. As you said in your introduction, the class is taught by Jeff Levine and David Gamble, and that's been really wonderful. And our class is wrapping up now because we're bound by the semester. As I'm sure you all well know, with the MBTA Communities Act, the requirements that you all must comply with is that 39 acres in Manchester must be rezoned to permit multifamily housing by right with a minimum average density of 15 units an acre. Of those 39 acres, 40% must be within a half-mile radius of the train station, and 50% must be part of districts that are contiguous. And that is because you're allowed to mix and match different districts to get to those totals. And so there is that contiguous requirement that you have to make sure to meet. With this class, we began in early September. We visited Town Hall and got to speak with some of you before that first presentation back on the 26th. In between, we visited the MBTA Community Forum back on October 14th, and we had other members of our class visit back on November 22nd to speak with those at the Manchester Historic Museum. And we really enjoyed getting to learn about your community and hear feedback through all these different avenues. In our last presentation, we were really focused on getting feedback from you all about where would you most like to see new growth in Manchester? What are the characteristics of Manchester today that are most important to you to preserve? And how do you imagine Manchester in the future? What are your priorities to achieve this vision? And this presentation and the work we've done since has really been responding to what we've heard. And on that note, I'm going to pass it off to Anna, who will speak more about how we're incorporating your feedback into our work.
Hi. Sorry, just to make sure everybody's hearing correctly, right? Especially people on Zoom. Perfect. Okay, I'm just gonna do one little thing so I can see everybody better. So great. As Bunjo was saying, our community outreach team, so a part of the class, one the group called the community outreach team. And what this group did was, assist at different town meetings and talk to people in the town and try to hear what the town priorities were in relationship to the MBTA Community Act and the rezoning and how we were taking on this project. And with all the conversations this group had, we were able to figure out a few really important things that we know are super important for the town. So first of all, we know that respecting the town character is a primary essence for the town. We want to preserve the historical district. That you guys really want to adjust parking, mitigate traffic congestion, ensure minimal impact on water and sewage system, and lastly, increase affordable housing. And so with this and understanding the requirements for the MBTA, we came up with our class, our principles for rezoning. And so the idea is that these principles are the guiding principles that we're using for the rest of the class in the design study I'm going to show you a little further on, and in the different parts of the final report that we wrote. So the first one is that the design study that I'm going to talk to you guys about in a little while aligns with the town character, but also maybe promotes the connection through open space and new housing. We want to prioritize preserving the historical district. We want to assess influence on the broader mobility landscape, addressing needs and promoting efficient and sustainable systems. We want to incorporate water and sewage system in the impact analysis to make sure if more people come to live in Manchester, it doesn't affect the sewer and water system, and to create a responsible resource management. And lastly, we want to contribute to increasing the affordable housing options, promoting inclusivity and addressing the town's diverse housing needs. So with all of this, we know that Manchester by today, and you guys know even better than us, that Manchester is a great historic town. We talked a lot about the necessity of preserving this historical district. It has great constructions. It has a beautiful waterfront. It has many great spaces, but maybe the opportunity to create new open spaces inside of the town. And with this, I'm going to pass it over to Melissa, who's going to be talking about the opportunities of rezoning different areas of Manchester and how these can fit into the MBTA requirements, MBTA Community Requirement Act, and also in accordance to what you guys think is important and our principles.
Thanks. Hello, again, I'm Melissa, and let's dive a little bit into what implementation actually looks like. A lot of this, of course, you all have been looking at already for a long time. But as we've discussed before, the kind of most straightforward way to go about rezoning for higher density is through zoning overlay districts. And for most of these kind of rezoning strategies, we think that the multifamily residential overlay is kind of the most straightforward way to do this. It gives the town a lot of flexibility to cross previous zoning boundaries to kind of make these new designations without having to rewrite the original zoning. And it's a great opportunity to sort of mix and match sites. There's very few state requirements when it comes to this sort of overlay, just that somehow the town needs to allow 15 units per acre by right. And for one of our sites, we were thinking a lot about mixed use overlay district. So around the MBTA commuter rail station, maybe having the opportunity to do some new commercial development in addition to residential development to keep that mix of uses that's there today, but kind of allow some flexibility in what are we going to do with the sites. So with the mixed use development overlay, there is no minimum parking requirement allowed for those non-residential uses. However, we recommend no minimum parking in general, even for the residential uses, given that this can make development costs higher. It can lead to a suboptimal distribution of parking. And this has been something that a lot of communities have tried out with success throughout Massachusetts and throughout the country. And of course, it does not lead to there being no parking built, since people, banks lending money for developers still want to see that this is profitable and that there's enough parking to kind of serve the needs of whoever is going to be living and using in these new developments. So let's talk about all of these sites. Last time we talked about 6 different areas of town. Tonight we're going to talk about 7. In response to feedback from last time, we explored this new limited commercial district site, and we adjusted the site boundaries from before to kind of reflect more what you all expressed looking for in these potential areas. And of course, we proposed these kind of as places that we thought might be a good idea to rezone, but these are just examples. And we think that there are some takeaways from the process that we went through that could be applied to anywhere that might end up being rezoned in Manchester. So as you know, we have some sites that are going to be within half a mile of the MBTA station. We have other sites that are going to be not within half a mile of the MBTA station. And let's start with 2 of those sites that are a bit further away. The one is in the limited commercial district. So with the potential arrival of cell signaling to this site, kind of east of the former mine area, east of the Manchester Athletic Club, where there's a lot of vacant land right now, maybe there's an opportunity for quite a bit new development or a new kind of housing district to be built. One thing here that we really wanted to think more about was how would potential new residents of this area interact with the transportation network, particularly crossing Route 128 might present a difficulty with accessing downtown Manchester. The other site that we wanted to mention outside of the half-mile radius from last time is along Old Essex Road. It's such a beautiful kind of winding suburban road with lots of 2- and 3-family homes there now, a lot of single-family homes. So maybe there could be a little more density here through infill development, but still maintaining that suburban feel. For all of our sites, we've been doing research on the potential flood risk. Since Manchester is this beautiful coastal town, there is a lot of flood vulnerability, as you all have been talking about quite a bit. And we looked at these two sites outside of the half-mile radius, and the limited commercial district, fortunately, is very resilient to any sort of like flooding concerns. And by and large, the Old Essex Road site is as well. However, it does have that proximity to the Sawmill Brook. And so we would suggest looking more into potential like flooding during rainstorms that might occur in the future if that site moves forward in Manchester's process. I should also note our analysis is based off of flood risk maps from earlier this year during the summer. There were some new ones that were released just a few weeks ago that kind of came out after we'd already done a lot of this analysis. But given that these are still pretty recent, we think they should give some pretty solid insights. Moving on to a little bit about the land use on these sites. As you know, the limited commercial district right now, this part of it is quite vacant. There's a lot of parking. So there could be a lot of new development there, while Old Essex Road is already largely residential. And so that's where maybe it's more of an infill opportunity. Moving on to the rest of the sites, they're all within the half-mile radius of the MBTA station, and they kind of represent a few different approaches. Most of them we think would be opportunities for infill development. However, the area around the station we think could be an opportunity for some more large-scale development, which we'll talk a bit about later. That's more getting into our little bit kind of new ideas. So it's the School Street site here, number 5 on this map. It's bound by the School Street and Burnham Lane, and there's a large surface parking lot there right now. It's currently very low density. It's very close to the Montessori school and the train station, and it's like very resilient from a climate perspective. So when we think about this site, we're kind of imagining, oh, maybe there's younger families moving in here. Maybe they weren't able to afford, there wasn't the right type of housing in Manchester for them before. But maybe there could be some new development here that makes it a great place for people to come back and raise their kids. Site number 4 on this map, the Sawmill Circle site, encompasses some homes along Elm Street and Morse Court, including like Sawmill Circle development and the Powder House apartments, all located at the base of Powder House Hill and it's near Central Pond. There's a couple of office complexes there as well, and there's a bicycle store. Our third site here around Bridge Street is close to the boatyard. So it's not the most intuitive choice. However, we saw that there is a lot of open space here right now and that maybe there could be some new housing. It's not the most convenient walk to the train station, so this site we think needs to be considered alongside the transportation options. Our final 2 sites are kind of right here. This is more in the heart of historic Manchester. And we are thinking about this area around Summer Street. There's lots of multifamily housing there now. There's lots of amenities close by. Maybe there could be some more infill development. And given that it could just fit in with what's there now, maybe there's not even that big of a change aesthetically to the area, but there could be a lot more density. There could be more opportunity for families to find housing options. And finally, we have the area around the train station. So as you know, lots of commercial use there now. And maybe we can imagine more commercial use there in the future in addition to residential options, giving people a really convenient location to live and access commuting options. Let's look a little bit at the flood risk for all of these sites. Fortunately, the School Street site, the Bridge Street site, and the Summer Street site are generally quite protected from flooding vulnerability. Thinking about the Bridge Street site a little bit more, according to the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, only this area east of Ashland Avenue has the potential or has potential for flood vulnerability by 2050, with flood heights potentially reaching up to like 4 feet. However, we are thinking about ways that green space and pervious surfaces could be used here to mitigate those flood concerns. And additionally, this area around the MBTA station would need to come with, the development there would need to come with some careful flood mitigation strategies that Anna will get into a little bit more later on. since you all live in Manchester, you're quite familiar with the land use in these areas. However, we wanted to note that there's a lot of mostly residential land already, so maybe we're just kind of increasing the density of that residential use. But this area closer to downtown at the train station has a lot more diversity in use now, which goes into the thinking of maybe we have a mixed use overlay district here. Additionally, to meet the contiguity requirement, like 50% contiguity requirement, the strategy that we recommend is connecting the station area to the Summer Street area, either through a strip kind of close to the historic district or one that just incorporates a very small portion of the district. So this would kind of prevent like having too much overlap with the historic district itself, but still using these sites to meet that contiguity requirement. The other sites, they don't interact with the historic district at all, or we strategically changed them so that they wouldn't overlap with it. And we were also thinking about ways that development close to the historic district, but not in the historic district, might look a lot like what's there now, and kind of have this cohesive feeling of historic Manchester's character. So thinking about all of these different sites, the station area stood out to us as a prime location for like transit-oriented development with access to lots of views of the beautiful waterfront, have this diverse use of land in the commercial core, and to think about, given these flood risks that Manchester faces, how can we really work to adapt to these flood risks while continuing to increase opportunities for people to live in Manchester. Currently, the majority of this site is home to a large surface parking lot, and our design team envisioned a potential way to transform this area while keeping lots of parking, but also inviting some new activity. And to talk more about that, I will turn things back over to Anna. Thanks.
Hey everyone. You can't see you, but it's still all together. I know we've been talking a lot about different possibilities for rezoning, et cetera, et cetera. But what we want to do now is introduce to you guys a case study that we made, or the design team designed, and it's gorgeous, and work to show you what a speculative, sorry, it's a hard word for me, design could look like when you rezone an area. And so with this, like Melissa said, we picked the station, so in the area next to the train station. And the idea is that we created this redesign of what the area could look like, but it's super important that us as students cannot make this happen. It would be a potential idea that could be maybe used or recycled or redeveloped by a developer or some kind of public-private partnership. But the idea is that we wanted to use this visual tool to show how we could revitalize a space, in this case, the station area, through rezoning and create new housing, more density, and more open. So just a little bit about what's there already. I know that you know this better than us, but we created these existing public green space map to show where there's green space. We know there's a town hall green, where we actually met some of you, the Reed Park and the Mascanoma Park. But we believe that there's an opportunity next to the station to create a bigger open space as the primal open space of the town. So here we show you all the building frontages. So here are where there are buildings around the different open spaces, but we believe there is also an opportunity to create more buildings and more density in housing in the area next to the train station. So this is the area that we decided is going to be our case study. Remember that this is something that's just an example that we're using to show what rezoning could look like, and it would be something that would have to be made by developers or a public-private partnership. So here, there's all the parking. We know that parking is very important, but we believe that we can take this area, make more parking, and also increase commercial use and housing. So believe it or not. This is what we're proposing. This is just a simplified drawing of our design proposal. So the idea would be to create more housing around these areas, as you can see here with my cursor, and a new town green. These are the buildings that we believe could go into these spaces and have more housing density that would meet the MBTA requirement. And also it would have a better and bigger town green. So we wanted to have a little inspiration, and the inspiration that we got is a little bit about what already is in Manchester. We have this historic postcard from Manchester by the Sea, but we also took inspiration from other cities, towns, like Nantucket and Lexington. And so with this, we created this proposal of revitalizing the station area through a design concept. And this is a collage that was made with one of the postcards that we found in Manchester by the Sea. We can show the train station, this town green that we're proposing, and some of the housing. So what is this design idea doing? It's imagining a vibrant town green that creates opportunities for connection and community. It imagines the creation of more local business and the opportunity to support local business in Manchester, and meets the Manchester housing needs, which we know is super important, especially with the MBTA requirement. So this is a plain view of what the new buildings we're proposing would look like. So first off, right off the bat, we know that we're proposing the town green to be where the supermarket is. So a little later on, I'm going to be talking about phasing. So there is never a closing of the supermarket. Rather, it's a new supermarket's being built while the supermarket is still open, and we have that plan. So don't worry. So here are all the buildings that we're proposing. We're proposing to create these new buildings. The three, so 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 6 would have first floor commercial use, and the second and third floor would be residential. Then also in number 1, you would have the supermarket, which would be the first floor commercial, and a community center, which we know is here. And these 2 buildings would become only residential. Here is a diagram of what the massing would look like. So how tall these buildings would be. The 5 buildings would be 3 stories each. They would be multi-use, so first floor commercial for these 3, and then residential, the other 3 floors. It would have a total of 122 new units, which is super important because, as you remember, Pancho said, and you people know already, that you need 15 units per acre for the MBTA Community Act, but this is giving you 23 units per acre. So that's super good. It would create more parking. It would create 260 new parking spots, 1 spot for each unit of housing, plus 138 new parking spots for grocery store, community center, and train commuters. The total retail floor area would be 44,300 square feet, as you can see here. And it would have the community center in the first floor of the building where the grocery store would be, and there would be housing on top, and the train station where we hope that maybe also there could be a new cafe. So a little study about retail. We did a study of the existing retail. So everything here that's in darker red is the existing retail, and here in the brighter red is the retail that we're proposing. So it's an idea of creating a more flow in the space and being a retail part of the town plus this open space town green. This would be the public realm, so it connects this open space town green connects with Masconomo Park, creating a better flow into the space. And this is what we envision as a small design of what this space could look like. Again, developers would have to make it, but this is the idea we had to show. First of all, we would want to mask this town green from the street. So there would be buffers of plants, there would be tree-lined streets, and there would be a rain garden. But most importantly, and in what Melissa was talking about it is being a high flood risk area, we would want to make permeable pathway that decreases the risk of flooding. This is a great opportunity also maybe to create a market for vendors and create events and community gatherings as taking over this space. And also we would want people to be able to enjoy this space with tree swings, open play spaces, benches, picnic areas, lighting. And as we had talked about, maybe in the train station having a cafe, and it could have an open seating, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole idea behind this design is to create a vibrant town center. Oops, we went back. So how could we get there? First of all, like I said before, when we're creating more density, because it's 23 units per acre, there's an opportunity because you're creating more than the MBTA Community Act needs for you guys to be able to talk to developers and make sure that if they were to create a space like this, you could ask for the town green. So as I talked about before, and because the supermarket is in this area 5, it's super important that we have phasing so the supermarket never closes. So this would be the phases that we created. Of course, it's just an idea. There's various other ways that this could be done. But the idea is that in each of these phases, you'd be constructing a part of this town green, and you would never have to close the supermarket or the grocery store or the retail. So in the phase 1, you would remove the gas station, you would start creating the new grocery store, the new community center, and 2 floors of housing. In phase 2, you would remove the bank and small stores, you would create the new station building, a new cafe, commuter rail parking, as you can see here, and 3 floors of housing. In phase 3, you would remove the stores and office buildings such as the Dunkin' Donuts. It would have the first floor would be retail replacement and the second 2 floors would be housing. In phase 4, you would remove the community center, but as we said before, it was being built in phase 1, so it moved over there. And you would have additional commuter rail parking right here, and you would have 3 floors of housing. In phase 5, we would finally remove the supermarket. But remember that in phase 1, we built the supermarket so it could move easily towards this new building, and we would create the town green. And finally, in phase 6, we would remove the existing stores. We would create additional retail replacement. We would do additional parking behind the new building, and we would create 2 floors of housing. And so these would be all of the phases. So we're going to go back for a second. That we would be creating for this design idea of how rezoning could be placed in the town of Manchester. So right now, Pancho is going to talk to you about all the infrastructure considerations and the impacts that a rezoning or this case study can have over the town.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, we think that that design study really speaks to our priorities and a lot of things that were on our mind throughout this project, working with you all. And that was really exciting. And from there, I think it's important to remind you that what the MBTA Communities Act is asking you to do is to rezone less than 1% of the total area of Manchester. That's what those 39 acres amount to. And that the area within the half-mile radius is about 3% of the land within that half-mile radius, such that what we're envisioning with these changes, we think is at a reasonable scale. And thinking about scale with our zoning scheme, we really took into consideration flood mitigation because of the immense impact it has on Manchester. So we prioritized having development in areas with less flood risk. We know by including Sawmill Circle as well as the train station area, we are including areas in our zoning scheme of high flood risk. But we think that with the potential there and how many people already live there and how much is going on there, they are appropriate to consider in our analysis. We want to encourage you all that new development should reduce impervious surfaces and it should set elevation heights for new construction, in particular thinking about those 2 places. And we also want to incentivize residents to flood-proof their homes. And we think that could take such simple steps as having programs to help residents clean out their gutters to something more expansive, such as supporting sump pumps. We also really thought about the impacts on water and sewer that upzoning would have. And in speaking with you all, we learned that there is significant sewer capacity in Manchester by the Sea, such that we think the modest upzoning we're proposing would pose no additional strain on the sewer system. We recognize that right now, both your sewer and water systems are facing, the systems themselves are facing challenges because of flooding and saltwater intrusion. And so we think it's important to highlight then that the modest upzoning that needs to be undertaken as a part of the MBTA Communities Act would do very little to actually, would pose no additional challenge to those systems. And we also really want to stress that with thinking about water and sewer, the boundaries of the sewer system in Manchester are somewhat limited. And so with the different zoning options we've put forward, especially those outside of the historic district, aren't necessarily reached by sewer. And so there are other considerations that you all are well aware of to make in your process. And lastly, in how we thought about traffic and parking, right now, 58% of Manchester residents commute alone in their car to work, for those who do work. And we think there's the possibility to change that and to really promote existing public transit and walkability to challenge that narrative. And we know that a part of you all's experience of living and enjoying Manchester is how crowded the downtown gets on summer Saturdays. But the MAPC did a study this summer of parking in Manchester and found that other than at peak hours on peak days, less than 85% of the 485 parking spaces in downtown Manchester are in use at any given time. And so with our analysis, we recognize that experience and that concern, but we also think that there is capacity there with your current systems such that we think it is appropriate to consider having no parking minimums in these future zoning proposals. And so, again, writ large, with getting to learn more about Manchester and work on this for you all, I think we've really accentuated and celebrated a few different parts of Manchester in this presentation today. And that's that we think you all have great open spaces, and we want a vision for the future that really centers that and further stitches together the downtown. We think that by prioritizing transportation strategies, you can improve connection within Manchester to improve people's connection to the place and to make it a better place to live. We think that in our design proposal, we put forward some strategies for how to really support local businesses and kind of enliven these public spaces. And we think that the core of making that all happen is housing and is having a housing stock that is capable of supporting people at different places in their lives to live in Manchester. And we are really excited to get to differentiate that in our zoning proposal. Throughout this class, we have put together not only this, but a really wonderful report that we think has wonderful ideas that we hope that you all will implement. And we're happy to hear your thoughts on our presentation today and to dig deeper into all the work we've done together. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I have to say, 100 years ago, when I was in planning school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, I worked on a similar kind of project. And I wish we'd done as good a job as you had in terms of those pretty slides and things. But I guess I'll just up now for questions from the task force. Well, Gail, by the way, Denny Hall is here, so.
Unfortunately, I was working on the schedule, it was sent out a couple of days ago, set start at 7.
Sorry. But we're glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
So questions from task force members.
Well, I'd like to, Chris, I'd just like to say, I think these people have wonderful insights and courage to walk into a town which thinks it's paradise and make suggestions of how it could be improved. So I think you've done a great job. I applaud you for coming in here and clearly this report is the result of huge amount of effort and analysis. And I thank you deeply for what you've done. This is very, very helpful, and I truly appreciate what you've done.
Thank you. we're so grateful for the learning opportunity.
I have questions.
All right, so
In your case study focusing on the downtown area, tell me why you decided to put the new green where it is and how you chose the building height. 5 buildings, the heights of each. Tell me how you came to those conclusions.
Perfect. We're gonna hand you over. Do you see me? No, I, 1 second.
Okay, it's so.
Okay. I'm gonna hand you over to the design experts to respond to this question. Super good question. And also I would love to know what you guys think of the town green after they respond to this question. If you think it's possible, so. Okay, I'm gonna hand you over to Annabelle, who's gonna talk to you. She's part of the design.
Can you hear them? Can you hear them?
a little
Yes.
government. It's a little government.
Hi, my name
Oh,
Lost
we can't
you.
hear, I'm
Just lost
sorry.
you.
We lost you.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Mhm.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Okay.
Hi,
Why
I'm
you-
Annabelle. This is Claire.
Hi.
We're 2 out of the 4 design team members. I think to answer the initial question, we actually did explore an alternate option where the park was slightly more towards the south where that L-shaped building is in the plans. And I think that's also totally a reasonable thing. I think we have a map somewhere of that as well that we can share with you. I think it just kind of depends on, we felt like where the park was in those plans created like a better green space connection with the town hall green. And so it was really more about kind of extending that greenway versus if you put it slightly lower, it might be more flood resilient or like provide more flood resiliency for the town. So there's definitely options there. And then do you want to talk about the heights?
Absolutely. Just to add to that briefly, another key factor in shaping our designs was emphasizing the beautiful views that Manchester enjoys of the water and of preserving view sheds such that from the commercial areas and from the station, there would be beautiful views through to the harbor. And so placing the town green on the front edge, so to speak, of the station site invites that view shed to expand in a certain way. In terms of the building heights, they are first of all in line with the existing building heights in that area. We took into account the existing building stock on Beach Street in our designs, and also part of our objective in producing this town green and part of what's required in order to produce the town green is to build sufficient density that it would be financially feasible. And so in order to have enough housing units to make a strong argument in favor for a town green and to potentially extract that from a developer, we wanted to ensure that there were enough housing units in the scheme. And so that also informs the heights of the buildings.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I wonder if you could spell out a little bit what the total acreage is that you came up with within the circle and where those spots are. I know we focused on the downtown, but which parcels and how did that acreage add up? That's my first question. And second, maybe you could talk a little bit about the parking issue. I think you said you were adding 122 units and you're going to have somewhere over 400 parking spaces, but I gathered those were not dedicated to the units. Those were just free floating. Anyway, just talk about that impact of parking in general.
Perfect. Do you hear?
Can't hear.
Okay, I'm gonna pass you over to Seamus, who's gonna talk about parking, and also, just to repeat the first part of your question, it was about the other areas that aren't the train station. These are the zones that we thought were possible to rezone. Could you repeat that first part of the question?
the table.
Right.
Oh,
The total
yeah.
acreage. Perfect. Here. Great. I can talk.
Okay.
Awesome. Here's sites, again, that are all within the half-mile radius. These are also covered in a lot more detail in the report, including like for each of these, what percentage of the various requirements does it fulfill the requirement for within the half-mile radius and the total requirement. But here is a quick overview. So the smallest one is just under 7 acres, and the largest one within this radius is just over 14 acres.
And so now to talk about parking, you know, actually we're gonna change.
So it actually exceeded the requirement for within the circle. Am I right about that?
So we're putting forward options such that you all can mix and match. We're not putting forward all 7 of these sites together as one combined proposal.
But they could be combined, and yes, they would fulfill that, the 39 acres. Can you hear?
2 outside,
Yeah, it didn't express the parking issues.
and if you take 1 and 2 together, that's 16 acres. Plus.
And the parking?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the design picture with the parking lots. So the design that we're showing, you know, I think, as you know, there's already existing surface parking in the area. And part of the idea of the design is to kind of relocate that parking and to kind of hide it so that instead of when you come into, you know, you step off the train in Manchester, instead of seeing, you know, a big lot, you see this nice town green and a bunch of building frontages, kind of the way it is when you go over on, you know, Union Street or in other parts of the downtown where there's a nice, you know, building wall on both sides. You kind of get that here. But as we know, any developer, especially in a place like Manchester where usage of cars is very common, they, you know, for their development to make sense, they would almost certainly build a certain amount of parking. That said, I think part of our recommendation is to not require a specific amount of parking, which is a strategy that's been taken on kind of all around the country, because what we found is that basically a lot of these parking requirements that are built into zoning codes are kind of outdated or were put in place sort of arbitrarily, and often they result in empty parking lots, and also you know, people are paying in terms of the rent that they pay for a parking space, even if they might not use it. So it both makes it more difficult to build new housing, and it also makes the housing that is built often more expensive because you're, you know, subsidizing parking whether or not you're going to use it. So the idea of removing a parking requirement is that it gives developers the freedom to build kind of what the market would actually demand in terms of parking. And we think that, especially in downtown, Manchester is so walkable. It's close to the beach, and it's close to stores, and it's close to the train station. So people who are seeking to, you know, maybe not use a car as often would have that option. And so, and as my classmates also mentioned, you know, banks have to provide loans to developers. So it's not like they, you know, are likely to come in and propose, you know, buildings with 0 parking, but it's about kind of right sizing it and allowing the market and, you know, the actual demand for parking to dictate what's built, rather than a kind of arbitrary 1 unit per, or 1 space per unit or 2 spaces per unit that's set out in the zoning code that may never go use. So in terms of what's in our picture, you know, this is showing kind of a, I would say, somewhat aggressive, you know, amount of parking to in the more traditional model. But the idea of removing the parking requirement is that developers would be able to use kind of the market forces and the demand for parking to guide how much is actually built.
And as to the numbers we cited, that was from an MBTA study that found that there are 485 parking spaces in downtown Manchester. And again, they found that on peak hours, on summer Saturdays, Manchester does fill up as people come into town for the beach, but that for the rest of their study length, less than 85% of those parking spaces would be in use. And I know I threw those numbers at you, so my apologies for sneaking it in there.
Can I say one more thing? Just one other thought that we had on the parking front was that because Manchester has these kind of different uses where people might have residential needs for parking during certain times of day, or shopping or going to the beach, it would be important, I think, for with the advent of redevelopment to consider ways that parking could be shared so that those uses can overlap rather than having, say, a dedicated station parking lot and a separate dedicated lot for residential use that neither of them would ever fill up. So looking for ways to combine and share parking space so that we can reduce that impervious surface and make the most out of the space that we're working with.
You have a slide or a visual of where those 485 spaces are?
The existing one.
We don't have one in our
Or does that?
Yeah, we have,
All of them?
the MAPC report.
We have that.
We don't have that in our report, but as Shannon was saying, it seems that in the MAPC report it is.
Yes.
Because that's
That'd be
also cited in our report.
yeah.
Is there other questions? Or
Yeah.
comments?
I have a couple.
Sandy,
Yeah, I have a couple. I want to continue the discussion about parking for a minute. And I wondered if you could just, so there were 485 spaces in the MAPC study. With the proposal that you're suggesting, how many spaces are there as compared to the 485?
So there are 260 that were included in the design exercise, which is one per housing unit that's included in that, plus 138 more.
But that's as compared to, as you can see in the bottom of the slide, the approximately 70 spots that are in the lot. So that's not to be compared to the 485, which is across the whole downtown.
Okay, do you have any comp figures? That would be very helpful.
No, we have, these are the,
So-
just to remind, this is a design study, and so we don't have a design comp, we don't have a comp or some kind of infographic about the total parking of Manchester.
But yeah, the comparison is with the 70 spots that are in the existing train station parking lot.
but we do have the parking study, which does tell us how many parking spaces exist today in each of those areas. So we can.
Right, so we can dig it out. I just wondered if you had it ready at hand. Okay. Second question is, there's a very lovely drawing you have of being in the town green and looking out toward the water. It's a, let's see, there, that's it. Okay, yes, that one. Can you point out to us where on the town green one is standing? You have a view.
Hi there. Can you hear me? This is Claire.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hi there. So this drawing, I'll preface any comments with the caveat that this drawing is intended to be more conceptual than a rigorous perspectival representation of what we're actually suggesting gets built here. It's a collage intending to demonstrate how these elements might come together experientially more than spatially, but the idea was that this view is essentially from the new train station or from the corner of the new town green with Beach Street looking down towards the water. You have in the background a postcard showing the historic harbor in Manchester, and then on either side, new housing developments. And the train is kind of a gesture towards the idea that you might see the train going across the water, that direction. But as I
Okay.
said, it's a very loose representation.
Okay, so it's not a view shed, it's not a picture of a view shed from a particular view. Okay, okay. And just one comment, I'd sort of like to second some of the things Gar and Chris have both said, which is honestly, I don't think we would have come up with the idea left to our own devices. So thank you very much for this suggestion. Yeah, I mean, it causes you to think about things differently.
Thank you so much. Feel like it's growing on you. The town.
Leanne first, and then Rachel.
And I realize this is probably not something that you was in your remit, but how would we get, I mean, you have a staging, how we would get from where we are to where your town green. And yeah, I got it that we build number 1 first. And by the time we get to number 5, we've already got a place for a grocery store. How could that happen? I could understand maybe if you have one developer who's doing the whole thing and is willing to hold a space for a grocery store open while other projects go on, but do you have any more insight than I do?
No, that's a great question, and also something that we were thinking about. I think this is what kind of Anna was talking about between like either right what you said of like having one developer do this and negotiating with them to ensure that in response to allowing them to have more density, that they actually build the green into their plans, or having this kind of public-private partnership. One of the other things we considered was having the town green either be like purchased by the town or like somehow create, like zone it totally differently, like have like kind of this be an outcropping of the mixed use overlay, something like that. These are all ideas we explored, which I'm not sure will totally be in the report, but just like kind of like hypothetical, musings, I guess. But no, it's definitely a challenge. I think the easiest scenario would probably be if one developer bought all of this land and you could just negotiate with one, but realistically it's probably more of a case by case basis.
So if this was 50 years ago, we could create an urban renewal plan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can make Denny the director right now.
Well, you just take it all the way out of the domain. No bankruptcy.
And just level everything all at once and build it right back up. And of course, everybody would still be using the grocery store while it was torn down.
Be awkward.
Yeah.
That was my question.
I see what you're saying.
And that's exactly what
Okay.
Say.
Greg, do you have any comment?
I just would like to echo the praise for some very creative and very talented work. So thank you all for your efforts. It really is, I think it is helpful to have some out of the box thinking for us to chew on. Yeah, I was contemplating the similar question that Anne raised. I can see where the owners of every spot except for 5 would have some motivation because we're adding density and greater value. I think the real challenge is how do you create the town green? That would have to involve some sort of public purchase process of some sort.
Or as they say, there's so much density in this area that we could probably negotiate that they don't develop the whole thing.
It'd be interesting to create a transferable development rights process, perhaps, where you didn't have the density by right, but you had to actually purchase that density, and that would create a market to do some of the public spaces, perhaps.
Well, I suspect given the density of housing that will be created, that this is actually economically feasible if it could be put together.
It would push the planning board some town agency into a position of active participation.
This is David. This is David. David, I'm one of the co-instructors with Jeff. And what's the expression? To plan is human, to implement divine. And I think it's a great question. Of course, one wouldn't want to utter the words urban renewal, in any American city, although I think the brilliance of the framework, and we would encourage you to think of it as a framework, is that it could be a master developer who then also brings in other developers, or this notion of a public-private partnership. I think that the interesting thing about the diagram and maybe the line of inquiry is that this could happen quite organically over time, not 50 years, but maybe 20. And in aggregate, over the course of the length of your town, 20 years is a blink of an eye. And so I guess what they would like to leave you most with is that most people think of the MBTA Communities Act as just increasing housing. You can do that together with infrastructure investments and public spaces. And so leveraging what you have and diminishing also what you have, which is acres and acres of asphalt, which is not appropriate at your train station. And I'm sure Jeff also has a few summary comments.
This is Ann Harrison again. I had the advantage of having seen a preview of this. So it's not as surprising to me as it is for some people. What I wanted to say is that we had a number of comments when we saw the preview, and it appears that you have taken into consideration all of them. And I particularly appreciate the trees along Summer Street. And the fact the post office isn't included.
Yeah, definitely.
But garage, family's garage. I kept that too.
Do you guys have any other questions?
So I guess we can open this up to the public. Tiffany, can you see hands waving?
Sharing your screen.
While we're waiting, I'll ask another question if I could. So you felt like the mixed use development would be viable under the act, under 3A, and the guidelines that they developed. We're getting a little bit of pushback on that question. If we create the desire to have mixed use, can we mandate it? Can we require that the first floors not be residential? And you're of the opinion that we can.
That's our understanding as of, I think it was August, when the Brookline memo or amendment was passed, because they wanted to similarly include mixed use development. But I don't know, Jeff, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, this is Jeff Levine, the other co-instructor. There's an analysis that the students have done that I believe shows that we think it is feasible with the MBTA Community Act requirements. Not all these areas would be mixed use areas, but some of them might be, and it does seem to work.
Yeah, okay, so as long as we're under that 25% number, then I guess we're okay, is that?
Right. Yeah, but then, because there's a lot in the report, they had to pick certain pieces of it, but they've done a full analysis of that kind of data. So not necessarily infallible, but it seems to work.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
We'll see what happens with Newton.
Yes.
Which is requiring or attempting to require.
Yeah.
And they get their report card in January.
Because we were told differently, like you're pointing out that
Newton has submitted some, or has approved something for submittal that does mandated.
And actually, this would be a great argument to send to the state and say, look, this is the way of making this 3A work better for towns.
that'd be an interesting exercise, actually. Extra credit, submit your plan to the, submit your report to the state, see if they would approve it.
We'll be the judge of that.
Are there any comments from the public or questions? Okay.
Terrific work.
All right, Jeff, do you have some closing remarks you might share with us?
I would see if the students had any closing remarks, but I just want to thank the town of Manchester and Greg and the task force and Ann and everybody who's worked with the students. You know, you never know going into a new community how it's going to go, and it's been really, really rewarding. I can say for me and for David, and I think for the students, you've been really helpful, and it's been a really interesting exercise, and hopefully it's helpful to you as you go into your next stage with the consultants to actually draft zoning. And hopefully this will help sort of jumpstart that work. Because you have a year, but years go quickly, as you know.
For sure do. And you say you have a report that you've done?
Yeah, so they're finishing up a report that we're going to send over to you, and we'll be getting hard copies printed too. So if you want hard copies, let me know how many you want, and we can see if we can accommodate that as well. That's part of what this class does, is produce a final bound report with the materials, because not everybody likes to read it online.
Great, okay.
That's great, that's great.
Do they all get A's?
No, that's garbage.
It's graduate school, you know. They're not motivated by grades.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It was enlightening for all of us.
Very well done.
Thank you.
If anyone's looking for a job, let me know.
Now you're talking.
The town's trying to hire a planner, so.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. Okay. Hi, Sandy.
You're front and center.
Uh-oh.
All right, is there any other discussion for the task force to just take a motion to adjourn? Oh, there's an issue. We have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday, and some people can't come. And I'm thinking maybe we'll just put it off until January. Is that okay?
What's next Thursday?
This is the meeting, we're gonna talk about the principles. And so
Oh,
forth.
right.
Is that a communications meeting?
No,
No, it's very
no, we are,
important.
there is a communications meeting. It just did
The
my
meeting
agenda.
schedule is screwed up big time. And, you know, I parked these meetings in my computer. And I went to one meeting, meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning, and that didn't exist.
Oh, that's
So,
horrible.
So there is a schedule that was sent to everybody.
yeah,
today.
yeah, and I've inputted everything in it. I don't think next Thursday was in it.
No, it wasn't.
Took it out.
I just wanted. I just wanted to make sure
We
everybody.
took it out and now we're discussing whether we should take it out.
Exactly.
Okay.
I just let you know that it's.
Okay.
And the meeting tonight didn't start at 7.
No, it started at 6.
Well, good for you.
Well, and also,
Right. I have that written down as 7.
yeah,
At one point, I don't know if it was 7.
I did too, but I
Yeah,
looked on the town calendar this afternoon and it said 6:30.
somebody put something down, I leave it there so I know. So when it changes, it would be helpful to have communication to that.
You can always go to the website on the town website.
But it's not posted until 3 days before.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. Anyway, it would be helpful to move on rigorous.
We'll work on it.
Chris,
Yes, Sandy.
the purpose of the meeting on the 14th, was supposed to be a kind of discussion of the principles that Emily kind of laid out with us,
Yes, yep,
the point of it.
that was the point of it, yes.
I mean, I'm one of the delinquents in terms of not being able to go on the 14th. But it's a pretty important discussion to have before we meet with Emily next. Is there another time?
Yeah, January,
Well, when we were reviewing it, yeah, I think I can pull it up, but did we have the 11th as the next evening task force meeting?
that's what
Is
we're
that-
meeting with Emma.
That's the meeting with Emily, and I don't know. if we-
Monday, the 8th.
It's January
January
11th.
Is there any way?
That's
Thursday.
Sorry, Thursday, the 11th.
I can pull up.
That's when she's back, right?
So your question, Sandy, is there a time between the 14th or between now and the 11th when we can
Yeah.
have the discussion?
Yes, that is my question.
I would add to that, we don't have a distributed list of those points. And I don't think we should come into a meeting without having had a chance to really sit with that list.
Yep.
And come in prepared to discuss them.
She just sent those today.
Yeah, we got them.
Oh.
We haven't.
I have a meeting down in my calendar, which may have nothing to do with reality, for January 4th.
Okay, so could we all meet on January 4th? We'll update the calendar if everyone thinks it's a good idea.
My calendar says January 4th as well, Sandy.
That may have been the original.
Yeah, that was.
I think it's been, calendar's been updated, you know, as we've gone along, but that might have been something set back in August. And then when we were talking about it, Emily couldn't meet on the 4th. So
That's right. So
I
we
think
went
that's
to-
why we,
Right.
so that you wouldn't have two back-to-back
So
meeting weeks.
would we like to meet on January 4th?
And the
I
11th?
would.
Would you both, right?
Both.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would.
The 4th would be a pre-Emily meeting.
A pre-Emily.
Okay.
Yes,
What time is it on the board?
go over the.
6:30. 6:30. That works for everybody.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a
And I have one other comment for you, Chris and Gar. I thought you both did such a nice job with those young people, kind of being encouraging, and I thought it was very gracious. I did something like that 7 centuries ago when I was in planning school. It was not so graciously received. So I thought that was pretty darn nice.
Did an incredible amount of work.
Oh my gosh, I want to see that. I do want a hard copy of the report.
Yeah, we should get at least a dozen of those.
Yeah, I think so.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
We get an unbound copy. So we can-
Yeah.
we'll get copies.
That's a good idea too. I will, yeah, I'll send Jeff.
I have the 11th at 7. Is that my mistake? Time.
What
I
day?
have that too.
Which day?
I have it at 7 too, Richard.
You did, I don't see.
Which meeting?
Yeah,
Because she
I had it on
she
the
couldn't come earlier. There was something with her schedule
Wait, which day?
on the 11th.
Oh, on the 11th.
Thank
Hold on.
Yes,
have-
I have a business owners
I
forum
got 6:30.
on that day at
I have
7.
6:30 with Emily on the 11th, but maybe there's something, I don't know.
That's, but actually, that's what I'm thinking of, is that's a communications week. So we will have to cancel that, but we'll figure that out next week.
Which one?
We had set a forum for the 11th for Manchester merchants, the commercial property.
We scheduled that, we were scheduled.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, so it's in the new schedule, but I don't know if I guess it did get circulated, but
Yeah, but I didn't.
Chris
check it.
Gale and I met and kind of looked at from
Yeah,
here on out,
because of the 11th,
right?
Okay,
but it was a tentative time.
So that got bumped to the
so the
18th
agenda I just submitted for next week then,
for the,
for the communication.
that's not changed, that's good.
It is, okay.
Okay,
Just a quick.
could I just confirm,
January
I'm
on
getting
the-
a little confused here, not
Changed
being. Could I confirm 2 dates? So on the 4th, we're gonna meet at 6:30 as the task force to discuss the principles. And on the 11th, will meet again as a task force to meet with Emily. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
At 7?
I think it's 6:30. I think we should meet at 6:30.
Yeah,
Emily comes at 7. Let's just keep everything at 6:30.
Yep.
Why don't
Yeah.
you just call 6:30?
That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Well,
I've got conflict until 7, but that's okay.
you could be with.
I can do it. I'm good.
Because Emily will probably be here till 7. All right.
Just a
Okay.
point of information, I've got a meeting scheduled with Gordon College to discuss potential areas of interest, mutual interest.
Yep.
I had a meeting with the fellow who is, prior to that, who is basically the development committee, development side of the house, and Gordon, his take was that Gordon would be interested in monetizing some of that land out there on Pine Street. He personally thought that family zoning would be better than the LCD in terms of creating value for the college.
Okay, well, I think it'd be very exciting if we could combine it with some preservation of certain areas.
Right. I also had a conversation with Steve Gann. We're gonna go walk that land.
That'd be good, yeah, you can work out a deal.
Yeah, but make a deal, where you get to the exit for vehicles.
Dealing with the college so far, it's had 2 speeds. Slow and stop.
Does it remind you of another?
Oh, it's done, okay. Oh, we're used to that.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, Denny, for that, that's great. Anything else anyone wants to bring up?
No.
Thank you.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you all soon, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, we.
We have this all day meeting right now.